A marvelous medley of Tiptree's best. Your Haploid Heart. When Ian Sweetlove and Pax Patton landed on Estha to check for humans, the job wasn't as easy as it appeared. Though the natives seemed human enough, only crossbreeding would be conclusive proof. But how were they to prove anything when sex was punishable by death? The psychologist who wouldn't do awful things to rats. Dr. Tilly Lipschitz hated his name, loved his rats, and would be out of a job if he didn't come up with a real zinger of an experiment soon. He didn't have much in mind until he took a midnight trip to his lab and learned more than he would have thought possible. She waits for all men born. She had eyes that could not see, but without sight she had powers that went far beyond those of all who came upon her. And lots more. So this is a long story, but I'll try to make it brief. I think I've previously mentioned in these videos how Stone's Way was founded as a village between two hills, and on top of each hill was a college. Nowadays, Greenwood College is still open, but Blackwood College closed in the 70s, in murky circumstances. Back in the 1920s, Blackwood was among the most prestigious colleges in the country, and was quite well known for some of its science programs. So much so that Blackwood developed as a technological institute in the 40s, serving the war effort and thereafter. The Tech Institute was also known for its research with animals, which I won't describe here, but they also had a small public zoo, which some say they developed as a kind of cover to humanize the research they were doing. The zoo was famous for a chimpanzee habitat, including several breeding pairs of chimpanzees. The habitat was maintained by a primatologist, Dr. Crane, from the 30s to its close. Dr. Crane's daughter, also Dr. Crane, was a physician in town for many, many years, from about the 50s until she retired right around 2000 at a very old age. This Dr. Crane's daughter was not a medical doctor, like her mom, but a doctor of philosophy trained in an obscure field, and she never worked for a college or university. Let's call her Dr. Crane III. She stayed home with her mother and, after her mother's death, as a recluse. She was never seen in town, but inevitably she was rumored to be beautiful and stunningly intelligent, etc., although nobody understood her work. She and her mother would have most of their requirements, such as food, delivered to their house, or really to the gates of their drive, because their house was more like a manor, with several outbuildings which had been labs for the first Dr. Crane. There were rumors that the Cranes sometimes had visitors for long stays and servants hired in faraway lands because the deliveries of food were so large, and because other people would sometimes be glimpsed through the gates, off in the distance, near the house. It was speculated these were patients of the second Dr. Crane because it would sometimes be said that these far-off people were limping. There was never a better description than that. Nobody knows when the third Dr. Crane died, but it seems to have been at least a few years ago. Her death was only discovered recently. The deliveries had gone on as usual. The payments were made by wire from the bank on a regular schedule. It could have gone on like that for several more years, except for a fire that swept through the outbuildings, apparently because of an accident. Responders to the scene contacted Greenwood College immediately because of what they found. There were 7 chimpanzees alive in the house, although I've heard these chimps were quite unusual. They seem to have been carrying on a well-established routine. They prepared their own meals, wore elementary garb, did the laundry, maintained the house and grounds, and they had plenty of time to enjoy themselves when their chores were done. There was a reel-to-reel movie projector in a home theater well stocked with movies, a small stage for communal performances with a chest full of costumes, sporting equipment, and a fine hi-fi stereo system, including an extraordinary collection of records from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. The chimps seem to have been especially fond of the Lennon sisters. Following initial observations at the house, the chimps were shipped to a zoo. I've heard they were quite upset. And that's about it, except for the details. Dr. Crane's body was found in her bed, remarkably well preserved and clearly cherished. There were fresh-cut flowers at her feet. She has since been cremated. The purpose of the outbuildings remains obscure. They were burned to the ground. Curiously, there seems to have been continuing research in those buildings carried right up to the very end, but by whom, nobody is quite sure. From the bedding arrangements, it is speculated there were 10 or possibly 11 chimpanzees in total. 2 bodies have been found in the labs, which would mean that 1 or possibly 2 chimps could still be out there somewhere. Or anyway, some people say there's a chimp still out there. In fact, drivers out that way say they've seen lights on in the house, but the house is on the far side of Blackwood Hill, so it's not easy for the police to monitor. It could be teens or even burglars getting into the house. The police are trying to get a handle on the intrusions. The house itself will be going up for auction at some point, and the opening bid will be quite low. I'm tempted, but of course, people are saying the place is haunted, and I'm not sure I could share a house either with a ghost or a chimpanzee mad scientist.